Welcome to our December State of the Union call, obviously last in 2024. We will be, we'll ask you to re-sign up for next year, and we're going to be changing the dates ever so slightly because we do not have full caging data for November, just because it's early in December for this time. And so I can tell you that overall, we're looking at about a 4% November to November increase, 23 to 24, but I don't have all of the nice graphs and details and all of that good stuff that I like to be able to have. So 2025 will shift to the third Wednesday of each month. I'll send out an invite to each one of you, and then it'll go out in our newsletter and things like that if there are other folks you want to invite. We had a similar challenge last month, so I put in last month's slides to talk about October. Since we didn't get through that last time, October was a very good month, generally speaking. Revenue up 14% and gifts up 4% year over year. And not often that we see that gift number popping up. So that's very exciting to see. And with November going up slightly, that it's especially good to see that it's not necessarily a timing difference. We were worried that, oh, this is going to pull forward for November. Thankfully, doesn't look like it so far. Most of our sectors experienced growth. The two sectors that didn't are smaller from the data that we have, and so smaller sample size to be able to look at. Those of you doing the math said, oh, revenue's up 14%, gifts are up 4%, average gift therefore is up 10%, and you're right. So not surprising, that's been a rather consistent trend throughout the year. And through October, 4% down on mail revenue. That should take up ever so slightly if those November numbers hold. And only a couple of sectors did see an increase, faith communities being the primary one in there. Some good months, but that first quarter was a tough one for folks. And I think a lot of that was we saw volume going down at that time of the year. And so naturally mail results going down at that time of the year. We'll also talk about a report later on here that talks about the future of mail and how we're working. That's something that we're working on too from a nonprofit perspective, but this is a global report that's coming up. So excited about that. Any questions on caging data? Okay, then we will pop over to our Super Bowl, Giving Tuesday. You probably saw from Nonprofit Times that GivingTuesday, the organization, reported a 16% increase in revenues. Now, later in the article, it did talk about a 4% increase in financial donors. GivingTuesday always looks at giving goods, giving time, giving money. And so I assume that they say that revenues went up 16% and 4% was the number of people donating in their data. But we'll drill down into that when they have more of that data available. We're working on, from a more perspective, we're probably going to put Giving Tuesday and end of year together in a report and do kind of what we did for Giving Tuesday last year, but blow it out with end of year information as well. So we'll have a bunch more information about this coming down the pipe. But in the meantime, there were a few big things, great news, mostly across the board. We did see increasing costs in a number of our sub-channels, but that there's no channel that you see that you want to pull back from. And then we saw that revenue and time sources and timing were shifting this year. So, any questions or comments before we go into some more detail? Okay. We found among more clients increasing gifts, a 75% increase in gifts day of. That's a 14% increase day of revenue year over year. And across Giving Tuesday campaigns, And this is what I was talking about in terms of revenue spreading out, not as much on Giving Tuesday itself, but from the Giving Tuesday campaigns, we saw 33% increase year over year. We are, for upcoming reporting and things like that, we're working with a number of clients to say, hey, do you mind if we share your story? Do you mind if we share it with your name on it, or should we anonymize it? All of those sorts of things. So we don't have a lot of organization-specific data yet on this that I can share. But yes, good news across the board, and more information to come as we're able to share that out. We talked about ad prices going up. This is digital is, not shockingly, getting more expensive. Google's costs increased 18% per click. More clients increased their investment in Google by 33%. And so you bought more clicks, but all of that revenue obviously going toward more expensive clicks. That said, return on ad spend is still over 4 times what you put in for those campaigns. Now, Google, tough to scale. Those branded keywords perform up here, and then your next best ones are way down here. And so not to say that you shouldn't be investing in Google and increasing that investment. Just know that on some other channels are going to have more forgiving. If we add to our spend, we'll still perform around this 4.47. Google's going to be less forgiving because there's a sharp drop off in the quality of keywords. Meta costs increased 32% per impression. Last year, we were talking about the data apocalypse over at Meta, where they were not getting cookie data, and the cross-app tracking from Apple was really affecting their ability to perform. I suspect that their investment in AI targeting has really helped increase things because their cost per click was down. And that's with increased spend going into it. 27% increase in revenues coming from Meta, and the return on ad spend was 2.6. So still strong and still an area where additional investment can pay out. And then programmatic, there was a 60% increase in investment across clients, and net revenue increased by 55%. So those increased costs, that increased investment didn't harm net revenue at all. So day of return on ad spend was 4.6. Days before, not as strong, but also part of the reason that you get that 4.6 return on ad spend, you're having those touch points that lead up to Giving Tuesday and prompt things. So folks are asking why, what the difference was. Well, a lot of what we talked about in our Giving is Tuesday report last year, omni-channel marketing, programmatic, texting, and smart advertising, really did bear out this year as well. So you really saw this shift from organic means, organic web, even email, and we dramatically increased the number of emails sent, and still revenue basically flat. And so that's not going to be the only means. That still a workhorse, still an important part of our digital strategy, but one that's more difficult to scale, especially if you're not scaling the list. You're scaling the number of emails to the list. That's more challenging. But paid search, paid social, paid programmatic, digital is increasingly pay to play, and that is challenging, but still significant increases in revenue. So great news there. These are all year over year, day of. And then you see things extending beyond Giving Tuesday. 36% of those programmatic revenues came in before Giving Tuesday. We saw a number of organizations that were starting Giving Tuesday messaging 2 weeks before, running it until basically now. So that's a change that we're seeing, and it fits with what we're seeing from the for-profit sector as well. Travel Tuesday became Travel Tuesday week. They're honing in on our turf, and I think we're going to have a Sharks versus Jets dance knife fight at some point to see who owns Tuesday. Any questions on any of that? Any comments? Anyone want to share how their results went? Come off mute and tell us how things went, or feel free to throw things into the chat if you're feeling shy and or not camera ready. Okay. Then onward we go to the future of mail. This is a report that's literally hot off the presses. Winterberry Group released this morning. Full disclosure, Moore is a sponsor of this report. The biggest sponsor was the U.S. Postal Service to look at the future of mail, working with Winterberry Group, very reputed and reputable insights into media mix. So working with USPS on this to say, how does mail fit into our marketing mix going forward? Greg Fox, who you know from these calls, and I were both interviewed as part of this, and they interviewed a lot of different people. It's based on a lot of good survey research. We did not have veto power over anything that went into this report, but I did want to give the disclosure up there that we're a sponsor of this. I did get to read it. I think it's a high quality report. I don't know. I don't think I would have vetoed anything even if I could, but full disclosure, it's out there and it's up on the Winterberry Group website. I know that's a long URL, but if you go to winterberrygroup.com, there's a little thing that says, hey, we have a new report coming out at the bottom, so it's pretty easy to find. And I'm just going to go through some top line stuff. I'm hoping Bruce Spiegel and the team there will be able to join us for future webinar or something of the like. Spend on mail will actually increase this year. There's that huge drop from 22 to 23 that kind of made the Postal Service say, hey, maybe we need to ease off of the gas on postal increases. Not perhaps enough to get them to realize it, but hey, better late to the party than not coming at all. I think a large part of this 2.6% increase was probably political mail coming into the sphere, and we're going to see a pullback on that. That's not going to be the whole increase as well. One of the things you'll see throughout the report is people that still see mail in the for-profit and nonprofit sector as a vital part of their marketing mix. Because costs were relatively stable, you can see the number of pieces has gone down over time, and they talk a lot about smart targeting in the same way that we do as well. As costs increase, you're going to pull back to say, hey, who are the people we really need to be talking to? How can I get more out of each package with things like customization so that I'm amortizing the cost of the stamp going up? Because a stamp is a increasing part of the mail package. It went from the mail package is more other than postage to more postage than other for the first time this year. We don't see that stopping. That's thankfully because we don't have paper shortages and things like that we did during the pandemic, but not thankfully in that postage is still substantially increased for where it was. Mail is still a vital part of budgets. You look at the top three, it's display, it's paid social, and it's direct mail, along there with paid search. And everything else is kind of much down the list. I think we will probably see connected TV moving up here, but moving up from 8%, there's still a lot of room to grow. Paid search is good, but as we talked about, challenges scaling it. It's interesting to see even print advertising is doing more than things like connected TV so far. That will shake its way out, but across for-profits, nonprofits, mail still a vital part of it, and they talk about how postal costs cause some people, even in the nonprofit sector, to come out of mailing, but the absence of mail impacted all of the channels. Not doing mail doesn't just hurt mail, it hurts digital because we know so many of those digital donors are actually influenced by mail. It hurts DRTV because there's not that additional touch point, hurts everything to not have that visibility out there. They talk about 4 key trends in the report, and I'm not going to spoil the whole report, but from volume to value, it's, we've all experienced this cutting down to the list that is going to perform for you rather than a spray and pray approach, customization within that to get more out of each piece. That's a part of responding to those cost increases resourcefully. One of the things that they talk about from the for-profit sector is catalog mailers are looking at these catalogs less as people are going to mail back the catalog reply device and do their orders that way, so much as the catalog piece drives online donation, online interactions and things like that. And it's very much the discussion that we're having to say, not as many people are putting checks in the envelope, they're going online. Can we create modal forms for them? Should we be using QR codes to respond as well? Silos within organizations are coming down, but attribution is still a challenge. I'm kind of glad to see that the for-profit sector is struggling with that as well, as we all are. Attribution is very much a journey rather than a destination, and something that we can all work to improve as we say, okay, we're going to add this channel to the mix. What impact does it have globally, and what does it have for this segment of people? And then they say AI is already having a huge impact. We've known about this for a while in terms of the targeting side of things, but you are seeing it more and more on the creative as well. So highly recommend the report. We'll be, when they post about it on social, we'll be, resharing and sharing thoughts and all of those good things that you do on social media networks to support partners' release. But you can get it here now early. Speaking of AI, there were a couple of interesting stories in here. Normally this would be in the potpourri section, but hey, a couple of items on one theme gets its own section. So first is in the Journal of the American Medical Association, ChatGPT outperformed doctors. So they gave doctors and ChatGPT, and then doctors who could use ChatGPT, different symptoms from a medical case report. ChatGPT got it right 90% of the time. The doctors got it right 74% of the time, and doctors who could use ChatGPT got it right 76% of the time. And so doctors did get a little bit better when they could use a chatbot, but still tended to overrule it when they probably shouldn't have. And so these were based on case histories that hadn't been published. So it's not something that ChatGPT could have trained on, nor is it something that doctors could have trained on, but it's a consistent set that has been used by researchers since the 90s. So a good test. I do have to probably, for legal reasons, say, if you have a medical condition, talk to your doctor. I know every drug ad you see says that as well, so I'm just going to make sure I put that in there for legal reasons, but might you also want to look at ChatGPT or your generative AI of choice? Yes, I would say it's an also, not an instead of at this point. And then ChatGPT came out with a new feature that's fairly interesting in that it can now intake prompts on voice, even for the free version. So you can set it up by going to the lower right and hitting the button on the app. There are some settings that you can turn on, so if you don't want your voice and what you're saying to train the model for everyone, you can turn that off. And then you just talk to it and you can get the transcript afterwards. When we did our innovation summit, Oren Hoffman talked about how he takes these generative AI on walks with him and talks with it to bear out ideas so that he has a partner in that. But others that were recommended in an article about this, talking to historical figures, if you are wondering what Abraham Lincoln would think about this thing, or if you're looking for a more militaristic approach, what did Genghis Khan think about your business strategy, you can do that, and you can do it in audio form. You can practice the language. It will work to correct your pronunciation. It also works as a translator, so you can say, please translate what I'm saying into German and what they're saying in German back to me, and it will do that voice translation for you. And then this one was interesting. You can actually do your presentation with it on, and it will critique your mode of speaking as well as the content and say you could tighten it up here, that sort of thing. So. Also in AI, this is Stanford Professor of Communications, Jeff Hancock. We're going to go a little bit deeper on this. He used ChatGPT poorly. ChatGPT will create hallucinations. They're looking for something that sounds true rather than is true. And so he used it with a court case. And we saw that last year in a couple of cases. So this isn't so surprising. So let's go deeper into this inception. The court case that he was using this to create is about how generative AI can be used to create hallucinations and misinformation. So he used Gen AI's hallucination in a case about Gen AI's hallucination. Well, let's go a level deeper. This professor is actually an expert on technology and misinformation, and the point he was trying to make is how that generative AI and deepfakes amplify misinformation. And so we have the full inception here of expert on misinformation testifying on how Gen AI can create misinformation using Gen AI to create misinformation. It's like the turducken of Gen AI misinformation. Into our potpourri section, Moore also has a new white paper out. I would recommend it just as strongly, of course, as the Winterberry Group one. It's about the impact of artificial intelligence on what search engine optimization, search engine marketing is going to do. And so starts off with this quote talking about how advertising supported business models for search engines tend to warp results, which is a really good point. And you'd think, hey, this is a critique of Google and how they're monetizing it. No, this is from the paper that Sergey Brin and Larry Page put together when they were Stanford students about the need for a Google-like algorithm. They wanted to get away from advertising-supported business models and just create pure search. And so the irony does kind of come through here. I am old enough in digital marketing to remember back when Google was not necessarily the standard. You know, you were working on Alta Vista and you were submitting sites through Yahoo and Demos, and the world was in a place where you didn't know that typing things into a box was going to be the way that people searched. It could have been a directory search. It could have been like Ask Jeeves, where you're putting in questions. And now what we're seeing with AI is that this is really, we're back to a place where search isn't stable anymore. People are using Amazon to search for products. They're using social, Insta and TikTok in fact, Google's own folks say that 40% of millennials and Gen Zs, if they want to find a restaurant, they'll go to Insta or TikTok instead of to Google or Google Maps or those sorts of things. So that's a big change to that incumbent. You also see GPTs, people going to Perplexity, people going to ChatGPT, Claude, all of those sorts of things, and putting in natural language, sometimes in voice, queries for things that are informational and getting long pieces of information out, including citations. I'm a Perplexity guy so far, but all of them have their own advantages. And so to react to that, Google has put that, AI generated overview at the top of a lot of its content, which is an update of its featured snippets that it used to have. All of the result of that is to push all of the organic content down and even the paid ads down. And so you see Gartner Group estimates that there will be a 50% decrease in organic search traffic to our websites in 4 years. So, with that in mind, how do we react? So the key recommendations that we had: adapt your content for this. This is how do you create content that works for search platforms, answering questions, prioritizing user intent. You can't stuff keywords anymore. You have to figure out what's going to work for each person and say, okay, what are the types of things that people are going to ask broadly about, not what are they going to type into a search box. So that authoritative voice is going to be important. Multimodal is a fancy way of saying people are going to put voice in and they're going to put video in and they're going to type in and they're going to expect to get images and video and audio out. I just had the pleasure of using Google's Notebook LM to create a podcast based on my book. And that was a really interesting experience and one that we're all going to have more and more in the future. Be a media company. The other thing that we can do to get around these search engines is to quote unquote own the relationship with the person we're talking to. And that happens when we have their email address and we become a trusted resource and people are coming to our sites to get fact sheets, take advocacy actions, those sorts of things. And so getting that first party data in and then personalizing to the person gets is an end run around this search ecosystem. And then it's vitally important that we keep our own unique voice, that we're writing content, not AI alone. To make sure that if you're an organization that says we talk about people experiencing homelessness instead of the homeless, because that way of talking about things changes out reality, that's something that you're going to have to insert and not have a GPT insert. A couple other things. Walmart is leaning into its ad business. We talked a little bit about non-traditional ad partners. They acquired Vizio, which has connected TVs, and so we're going to likely see Vizio TVs having ads for Walmart products. Vizio will also get control of their watch-free plus streaming service. They can also use the information from Vizio to tailor ads and product offerings and things like that at the store, and vice versa. So some interesting integration there and a smart move by that company. Comcast has spun off almost all of its cable networks. I think they kept Bravo into SpinCo with the idea of, hey, we can, in these, cable is not as big a business, or cable channels aren't as big a business as they were previously. Having them in the same portfolio as our streaming services makes it so that you can't reinvest the profit from these cash cows in those businesses. CNBC is propping up Peacock and NBC Universal theme parks instead of reinvesting in the service. It also probably means that you're going to see more cable consolidation. They spun it off with low debt with the idea of maybe they take on debt and Warner Brother Discovery's cable networks and things like this as markets. The 500 channels are represented by fewer and fewer media companies. And so that's going to lead to further consolidation. And then finally, brain rot is Oxford's word of the year. It's what comes from consuming excessive amounts of low quality content. And it was first used by Thoreau in Walden, where he talks about brain rot. He was not talking about social media, but he might as well have been. That said, if you feel like you're not going to be able to remember this because of brain rot, remember that Riz was the Oxford word of the year last year, and Riz didn't have the Riz to make it into 2024. And so maybe we won't be talking about as much about brain rot next year. Incidentally, there is a certain amount of brain rot in writing about the pastoral life like Thoreau did while your mom does your laundry for you, which she did for him. And so, yeah, not exactly the full pastoral life that he talked about.